Hello and most welcome to 1842 of the Heidegger series. We will continue with the article that Warren Goldfarb sent to me. Rule following revisited. The reason for the word revisited is that he previously had also Kripke on rules. The Kripkean understanding of rules is, as it turns out, quite different. It's chiasm, if you like, between Wittgenstein and Kripke. Although Kripke is one of the most respected interpreters, there are some problems with his interpretation. And we continue where we left off. Page 75 in my edition anyway. See how it fits with colors. This distinction in concerns comes out in the first two sentences of paragraph 186. Wittgenstein's interlocutor says, what you are saying then comes to this: a new insight, intuition, is needed at every step to carry out the order plus n correctly. The interlocutor is expressing the epistemological worry. How is it, given that there is a correct or incorrect way of proceeding, that I access it? Wittgenstein responds: to carry it out correctly. How is it decided what is the right step to take at any particular point? The concern Wittgenstein voices is precisely that of the constitution of correctness. So the initial disquiet is: given a finite amount of behavior, there's always a question about whether the rule is understood. This naturally becomes even more unsettling, since any finite amount of behavior, examples and explanations, is consistent with different ways of going on. Hence, there's always a question of what makes one of those ways correct. That's the reaction on which both Dummett and Kripke build their interpretations. Dummett concludes that there is nothing in the specification of the rule, along with the previous actions, in accord with the rule, that determines anything, or that has any hold on us. It at any point, you can always go on in any way that you like and be in the accordance with the specification of the rule. Every new step is a decision to apply the specified rule in a particular way. That is, Wittgenstein, that is, Dummett views Wittgenstein as a radical conventionalist. We could have gone on otherwise. And there is nothing that would have made what we did before either in accord or not in accord with our current application. Nothing about our going on 2, 4, 6, 8 up to 998,000 makes any continuation after 1000 more or less in accord with the rule that we frame as add 2. Because there is nothing in our understanding of the rules that makes it correct to go in one way rather than another. Hence, we simply choose one way of going on and call it the correct one. To my eye, Kripke starts in a similar way. He takes the point of the parable to be the idea that there is no fact as to which continuation is the correct one. Both responses can be called anti-realist. Each is an elaboration on the idea that there is nothing out there in reality that determines what is the right continuation. These readings build on the reaction to the parable that starts by saying that there is always a question about whether a person understands a rule. Since you have only a finite amount of behavior, and the rule has infinitely many applications. To be sure, Wittgenstein intends to elicit that reaction. But I believe that he also means us to question it. For there is a contrast between what we are inclined to say after in considering the parable. That even in the ordinary situation, with no waywardness or deviance involved, there's always a question about whether a person really understands. And the plain fact that ordinarily there's no question in everyday life when people operate, we take it that they are understanding rules and following them in the ordinary sense. So given such a contrast between the ordinary fact and what we are inclined to say upon philosophical consideration of the parable, we should ask whether in the latter we are putting a demand on rules that operates in abstraction from how we actually operate with rules. Wittgenstein, I believe, wants us to feel this contrast in order to suggest that we are lodging a demand that rules are to operate in some sense absolutely and unconditionally. And he means us to scrutinize it. Wittgenstein takes it that it is easy to think that this standard of unconditioned correctness is already there and that we can take it as given. That is what he wants us to recognize and to reconsider. Thus, Dummett and Kripke stop too soon. They stand fast with a skeptical reaction and do not investigate its sources. But that is precisely what Wittgenstein is trying us to do. That something fishy is going on is perhaps indicated in paragraph 186. When the interlocutor responds to Wittgenstein's question, how is it decided what is the right step to take at any particular point? With the right step is the one that accords with the order as it was meant. For as an answer, that is both right and wrong. Of course, how you mean an order determines what it is to follow it correctly. In the right tone of voice, this is the merest commonplace and completely anodyne. But the interlocutor's response is wrong or misleading or wrong-headed insofar as it conceives the notion of how the order is meant as self-sufficient, as in and of itself mandating each particular response. That self-sufficiency is central to what the interlocutor is trying to do here. Getting some notion of the rule itself to establish a standard of correctness as doing something beyond some particular explanation or example. Yet, if how we mean the rule does nothing more than a particular explanation can do, it can look as though there can be no constitution of correctness, and you could make any continuation the correct one. In short, if what Wittgenstein says at this stage is aimed at debunking the idea that how one means a rule is going to give you some notion of unconditioned determination of the correct continuation, then his remarks can make the carrying out of the steps look groundless. There being no grounds for going in on one way rather than in another. He ends paragraph 168 with, "It would almost be more correct to say not that an intuition was needed at every point, but a new decision was needed at every point." And that, of course, leads to Dummett's radical conventionalism. As long as one ignores the almost. If Wittgenstein is undermining the notion of the grounds for the continuation, the obvious reaction is to say that the continuation is groundless. That is the path that Dummett takes. But I think it is better to try to read Wittgenstein as doing something else, which is admittedly hard to make out, to undermine the notion of groundlessness at the same time that he is undermining a certain notion of grounds. He thinks that we have a philosophical or metaphysical idea of the grounds for correct continuation. But to undermine that notion is not to undermine a notion of grounds in the ordinary sense. It is to undermine the back and forth between grounds and groundlessness in some such philosophical sense. if this is on the right track, Wittgenstein is trying to undermine exactly the notion of groundlessness that Dummett thinks he is reading in the text. Dummett thinks that Wittgenstein puts us in some sort of precarious position because the meaning, the content of the rule does not give us the sort of philosophical grounds that we sought. On my view, in contrast, Wittgenstein is trying to say that there is no self-sufficient, unconditional support of this sort, but that should not lead us to think that we are in some sort of groundless position. As I indicated before, that what is at stake is a puffed up philosophical idea of grounds. The unconditioned constitution of correctness is suggested by paragraph 186. At issue as always for Wittgenstein, is the question, what are the facts of everyday practice? What features of cases in which I would describe myself as meaning this rule in such and such a way are actually used in practice to back up a claim about how to go on? How would I answer an actually arising question of how I meant the rule? And what features of our practices here can be misconstrued to lead to the inflated idea that there is something that functions as an unconditional ground of correctness. And that's the correct place to stop. I'm making this a two-part lecture. It's a bit short, but it's massive. Go to page 75, if you may. And in my edition, there is a sentence beginning with this distinction. It's somewhere on page 75 that you have, yeah. And here comes a question where Wittgenstein's interlocutor says, what you are saying then comes to this, a new insight, intuition is needed at every step to carry out the order plus n correctly. So we got a gazillion of rules according to the interlocutor. And as always, we agree with the interlocutor. It's almost impossible not to do that. Most often the interlocutor is the voice of common sense in some way. But Wittgenstein responds instead further down on the same paragraph. Listen now. To carry it out correctly. How is it decided what is the right step to take at any particular point? Just like in a game of football. 99.9% of the grammatical rules in the Wittgensteinian sense in football are not explicit, but they are still rules and they govern what happens in the game. Just like in quantum mechanics, it is not governed by a priori classical laws or forces or directions or XYZ diagrams. No, it is in the relation in that specific context. Everything is regulated. In acting, if you like. And jump the way down to my I paragraph. That's three or four paragraphs away. And look at this. This is just brilliant. This is why Kripke is excellent in this as a variety of the interlocutor. To my eye, Kripke starts in a similar way. He takes the point of the parable to be the idea that there is no fact as to which the continuation is the correct one. Both responses can be called anti-realist. But he doesn't go the whole way. The Kripke and Dummett solution stops there. They stop with a sort of anti-realism. There is nothing to say to the pupil or the wayward child. These readings, if you go down on that, go up a little bit, like 2 lines or 4 lines. For there is a contrast between what we're inclined to say after considering the parable. That even in the ordinary situation, with no waywardness or deviance involved, there's always a question about whether a person really understands. Isn't that interesting? And the plain fact that no ordinarily there is no question. Even if the wayward child or the pupil is following we cannot know if he's following the rule anyway, because the rule can at that point make the same result. And that goes for everything under the sun. No exception for anything. Rules are not abstractions. We can see if we go 4 or 5 lines further down. We should ask, and it's a mid-sentence start, whether in the latter we are putting a demand on rules that operates, and listen now, in abstraction from how we actually operate with rules. We will have a problem otherwise. We will have two levels of rules, how they actually work when we do things, when we are acting, and sort of an abstracted variety of that rule or rules that seem to be working somewhere else. Take Markian transcendental world that is nonsensical. We jump the next paragraph and read the first line in the next one. Yet, if how we mean a rule does nothing more than a particular explanation can do, it can look as though there can be no constitution of correctness, and you could make any continuation the correct one. Looks that way. Everything is becoming groundless. Couple of sentences down, it looks groundless. There being no grounds on going on in one way rather than the other. And he ends paragraph 186 with, it would almost be more correct to say that an intuition was needed at every point, but that a new decision was needed at every point. What Wittgenstein is doing is undermining the notion of grounds, as well the obvious reaction it is to say that the continuation is groundless. Groundless. Both those positions are questioned and seem to be difficult. Nothing speaks louder than action. It's the means that show what is the true rule. In chess, in football, therefore the language game, and therefore family resemblance. You're in the same family because you play similarly. Not exactly, and not your material identity. That's a huge difference. Kalle, please come in here.
Thank you. Let me go here. Hans, please explain in mathematics what is this? This is plus a number. What do you mean with plus?
What you are looking at, that is another way of explaining +2 or +4, something like that. The
Okay.
rule with the wayward child or the pupil.
So it was plus a number, like
Yeah, any
a
number.
regular
Yeah, I think it's
number.
2 in this example.
Yes. Okay. Um,
The interlocutor. Who is that? I'm just asking you so I'm sure that I made that clear.
hmm. Yes. You answered the question.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
And you are also clear who the interlocutor is. Who is that person?
it would be Frege. Or
Yeah, something like Frege, and in this case, it is very funny. He's somewhere in between Frege and Kripke.
mm,
It's even more funny.
um, so let's go almost to the end here. With 186. Or we could even take up this. This is a good point that Goldfarb makes, that Wittgenstein is only attacking the buffered up, the unconscious constitutional correctness.
Yeah,
So
very good.
he,
Yeah, you
so
got it. You got it.
Wittgenstein is not proposing anarchy.
No, no, not at, on the opposite. Just the opposite. The contrary to that.
Mm.
But he's also agreeing, and that's why he has the commentator, he has himself, and he has the interlocutor. He is agreeing. It seems that way.
Mm.
So that is makes his pedagogy so strong. He is agreeing at the start. It does seem really weird. Isn't there a rule anyway?
Mm.
He's very human that way. Very human, Wittgenstein.
That we could also, you mentioned that, but it might be good to point out that Socrates' case is actually arguing like most people would argue today.
Yeah,
I think
I agree. Yeah,
everyday
he's
people,
even
they
going
think
a
that there
step
are
further.
facts out there, so to say. So that everything is relative also as well.
Yeah.
So I think this is the two mistakes that Kripke makes, that there are facts out there somewhere, and two, that everything is relative. You could take whatever step you want. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. And isn't there where we are today in the modern discussion? It's either postmodernism or absolute relativism, or it's this naive realism, or what you can call it, or analytical philosophy, or a common sense matter theory of some sort.
Hmm. So where is the answer? Now we could say it's in how Wittgenstein proposes is in the practice and in the context.
Yeah.
You mean let me see the last two phrases of paragraph and this. Yes, so let me comment on this. I think this is important. Goldfarb makes a point about the word almost. So let me read the phrase. It would almost be more correct to say, not that an intuition was needed at every point, but that a new decision was needed at every point.
Yeah. Uh,
So intuition, I think here perhaps Wittgenstein was inspired by Brouwer, excuse me, Brouwer, the mathematician Brouwer, who was about
intuitionist.
intuition.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very good, Kalle. Wow.
In this,
Yes, yes,
Wittgenstein
yes.
actually agrees with Brouwer in this point, but only in this point.
Only this point,
So
yeah.
what we could say that, reformulate the phrase, it would be more correct to say that the intuition was needed at every point. No, actually, I think it's I said it incorrectly. How would we say? It would be more correct to say that intuition was. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I
Is it?
think actually it's like that. It would be more correct to say that the intuition is needed at every point. I think Brewer would also say like that. No.
He would say that. Definitely, Brower would say that. It's
And what does he mean intuition here? It's practice and the context. So let's say that you in everyday situation, if we would do this calculation, and after 1000 you would almost everybody would take 1002,
yeah,
1004, 1006 because it's the logic way. That is why so because it's our intuition which says that we should take it in that way. But intuition, in other words, is the practice, or usually practice, so to say. You do something by habit, so to say. And to use Bordeaux's term, you are a man of habitus. You do correct, you follow logic things. You don't make exceptions. But on the other hand, we should not fall into the trap of everything is a priori, because there are exceptions. Sometimes perhaps I want to jump directly to 1004,
Yeah,
or for one reason or another. So that is the point, that intuition is meant here practice and context, or habitus, the man of habitus.
yeah,
That you
definitely.
do something, things of habit, but there are exceptions, of course. That is the
There are exceptions, and I can also compare it to the uh, Edward de Bono stone logic compared to water logic. The stone logic is how we usually do things and how we perceive things to be, and this is why he has the interlocutor, and he's very he's very kind to the interlocutor. You need to be, because this is the position we all have from the beginning. But he shows that groundedness is uncalled for. But oddly enough, and this is where he, as you said, disagrees with Brouwer,
Hmm.
also groundlessness is also something that you can question. It is not
Yes.
groundless either. It's neither grounded nor groundless. Groundless.
Yes, yes. So he basically agrees, both agrees and disagrees with Brouwer
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
sense.
definitely, definitely.
And I think intuition is also a fancy way of saying practice and context.
Yeah, in a way,
Practice,
yeah, yeah,
practice,
yeah, isn't it?
practice, practice.
Yeah, in a way. It's a fancy way of saying intuition.
Yeah.
Very good, Kalle. I think that word needs so good. We're going to end there. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Kalle Lundahl,
thank you.
and we continue this tomorrow. Have a very good morning, day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Bye bye for now.